It is 3 in the morning in the dense pine forests of Camp Mackall, North Carolina, where you are entirely alone, carrying a 65-pound rucksack and navigating by map and compass through the pitch black without a single instructor watching you. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. We cover the stories the history books skip. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Special Forces Assessment and Selection, known formally as SFAS, is a 24-day evaluation designed to identify the psychological and physical baseline of an unconventional warfare operator. The United States Army does not utilize this specific course to build soldiers, but rather to actively filter an existing population for highly specific cognitive and behavioral traits. Unlike other special operations pipelines which heavily index on explosive physical dominance and immediate compliance to direct orders, SFAS specifically evaluates interpersonal adaptability and language aptitude. A Special Forces detachment operates autonomously in denied areas, requiring operators who can train foreign militias, negotiate with tribal leaders, and process complex geopolitical variables without direct oversight. The candidate pool for SFAS is rigorously filtered before the soldiers ever arrive at the selection gates at Fort Liberty. Eligibility requirements mandate a minimum rank of specialist for active duty enlisted soldiers, though officers in the rank of first lieutenant and captain also attend the course. A candidate must possess a minimum score of 110 on the General Technical section of the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Documented demographics show attendees arrive from conventional infantry, logistics, military intelligence, and armor divisions, representing a cross-section of the entire Army structure. The Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery measures basic cognitive capacity through subtests in arithmetic reasoning, word knowledge, paragraph comprehension, and mathematics knowledge. The general technical score is a composite of these specific sections, ensuring candidates can process complex operational orders and technical manuals. Furthermore, candidates take the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, a test that does not measure existing language knowledge, but the neurological ability to learn syntax and grammar rules of a fabricated language. The Army categorizes foreign languages into 4 distinct difficulty tiers, and a candidate's score mathematically dictates whether they possess the cognitive flexibility to learn Category 4 languages like Arabic, Mandarin, or Pashto. The physical baseline is established immediately upon arrival with the Army Physical Fitness Test, strictly graded to the baseline standard for the candidate's age group. For a candidate in the 22 to 26 age bracket, the minimum baseline requires 49 perfect push-ups within 2 minutes and 59 perfect sit-ups within 2 minutes. The 2-mile run must be completed in under 16 minutes and 36 seconds on a flat paved surface. These are only minimums. Statistical data shows that selected candidates typically score well above 270 points out of 300, frequently maximizing the run and push-up categories. Following the physical fitness test, candidates are subjected to a swim assessment to ensure basic water survival capability while wearing a uniform and boots. However, the true physical metric of SFAS is the rucksack march, a sustained load-bearing exercise that systematically breaks down the lower extremities. Candidates are required to march vast distances carrying ALICE or MOLLE rucksacks packed with a prescribed list of wet weather gear, sleeping systems, and steel plates. The dry weight must meet the minimum standard of 45 to 65 pounds, which is verified by cadre using calibrated hanging scales at the start and finish lines. The initial individual ruck march progression across the 24 days is a calculated escalation of mass and distance designed to test connective tissue durability. It begins with shorter timed movements to establish a candidate's baseline pace, rapidly evolving into undefined movements that stretch for 12, 18, and eventually over 24 miles. Physiological data indicates that sustained ruck marching with a heavy load over 3 weeks causes severe micro-tearing in the calf and hamstring muscles. The constant kinetic impact degrades the cartilage in the knee joints and compresses the spinal discs, leading to radiating nerve pain and severe stress fractures in the metatarsals. The Army deliberately inflicts this connective tissue damage to observe how a candidate's decision-making degrades when every step requires a conscious override of physical agony. Following the initial physical assessments, candidates transition into the land navigation phase, conducted across the sprawling, unforgiving terrain of Camp Mackall. The course is characterized by thick draws, stagnant swamps, and treacherous Hoffman roads that mathematically test a candidate's ability to maintain an azimuth under extreme fatigue. Point distances regularly exceed 8 to 12 kilometers, and candidates must navigate multiple points per day and night over a continuous period. The STAR course at Camp Mackall is notoriously difficult due to the specific topography of the region, which is saturated with dense vegetation that physically impedes straight-line movement. Candidates are issued a topographic map, a lensatic compass, and a coordinate sheet detailing 6 to 8 points they must locate in sequence. The points are small metal boxes hidden deep in the brush, completely invisible from the main trails. Because the terrain is relatively flat and lacks major elevation features, candidates cannot rely on terrain association and must trust their pace count and dead reckoning azimuths. The documented failure rate during the land navigation phase frequently eclipses the attrition of the purely physical events, accounting for nearly half of all administrative drops at SFAS. Land navigation performance is weighted heavily because it simultaneously evaluates physical endurance, spatial reasoning, and psychological resilience. The course forces a candidate to operate entirely alone, removing the herd mentality that allows physically weaker candidates to hide within a formation. The assessment isolates the candidate and measures their ability to execute a complex geometric task when they are starved, exhausted, and completely isolated in the dark. Candidates who survive the isolation of land navigation are thrust into Team Week, a series of complex logistical puzzles executed under crushing physical loads. These team events assess how a starved, sleep-deprived individual interacts with a group of equally degraded peers to achieve a common objective. Squads of exhausted candidates might be assigned an objective to move a 200-pound sandbag and 4 50-pound water jugs across 3 miles of swamp. The cadre provide only a few heavy wooden poles, some tubular nylon, and a ratchet strap, demanding the candidates engineer a transport mechanism. The evaluation criteria during Team Week shift aggressively from individual endurance to communication, emotional regulation, and the ability to accept or provide constructive input without ego. The cadre observe how the appointed squad leader organizes the element, whether they listen to viable solutions from subordinates, and how they react when their constructed apparatus inevitably breaks under the physical load. Documented cases exist in every class where physically dominant candidates easily carried the load, but were failed because they displayed toxic behavioral patterns. A candidate who belittles their teammates, hijacks the planning process, or fails to communicate effectively under stress will be mathematically eliminated by the cadre grading matrix. The psychological assessment component of SFAS runs parallel to the physical events and is integrated into every phase of the 24 days. Candidates are subjected to a battery of clinical instruments, including the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory and the Wunderlich Cognitive Ability Test. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory maps 10 clinical subscales, measuring tendencies toward paranoia, psychopathic deviance, and hysteria. The Wunderlich test measures fluid intelligence, forcing candidates to answer 50 complex logic and math questions in exactly 12 minutes to assess rapid cognitive processing. Army psychologists cross-reference these test scores with peer evaluation data and cadre observation notes to identify candidates who possess high cognitive resilience and low neuroticism. The Army is measuring a candidate's baseline psychological hardiness when completely stripped of their usual civilian and military coping mechanisms. Statistical modeling demonstrates a high correlation between candidates who score well on these specific psychological instruments and those who eventually graduate the Special Forces Qualification course. The integration of clinical psychology ensures the selection process remains an objective scientific filter rather than a subjective physical hazing ritual. The assessment methodology of SFAS relies heavily on the weaponization of ambiguity to break a candidate's mental framework. Candidates are deliberately not informed about the distance of the ruck marches, the time limits for the obstacle courses, or the specific grading rubrics for the team events. This lack of information is not an administrative oversight. It is a designed psychological feature intended to induce panic in candidates who require constant external validation. The ambiguity surfaces the specific behavioral response to uncertainty, revealing whether a candidate will maintain a steady, disciplined output or mentally collapse when the finish line is hidden. The execution of this assessment is conducted by the SFAS cadre, a hand-selected group of senior Special Forces non-commissioned officers. These soldiers are pulled directly from operational detachments and trained extensively in behavioral observation and clinical assessment methodologies. Unlike conventional selection courses where instructors scream, induce stress, and utilize a strict pass-fail grading system based on distinct physical tasks, SFAS cadre operate in absolute silence. They walk alongside the candidates with clipboards, recording specific data points on body language, problem-solving approaches, and interpersonal friction without ever offering correction or encouragement. The documented overall attrition rate for SFAS typically hovers between 60 and 70%, depending on the specific demographic makeup of the class. The attrition breakdown reveals massive spikes during the first physical fitness test, the subsequent ruck marches, and the grueling isolation of the land navigation phase. A significant percentage of these losses are voluntary withdrawals, where the candidate's psychological defenses simply collapse and they choose to hand their rifle to the cadre and quit the course. Army research on SFAS selection data repeatedly identifies that the primary predictor of completion is not absolute physical strength, but rather a high degree of emotional compartmentalization and intrinsic motivation. Candidates who are selected at the end of the 24 days do not become Green Berets. They merely earn the right to enter the Special Forces Qualification course. The Q course is a massive, multi-phase pipeline that lasts anywhere from 52 weeks to over 2 years, depending on the candidate's assigned occupational specialty. Candidates are diverted into highly specific training pipelines for weapons, engineering, medical, or communications specialties, learning the granular mechanics of unconventional warfare. Every candidate must also complete intensive foreign language training and survive the final culmination exercise known as Robin Sage. Candidates selected for the 18B Special Forces Weapons Sergeant Pipeline spend months learning the mechanics, ballistics, and tactical employment of United States and foreign light and heavy weapons systems. Those selected for the 18D Special Forces Medical Sergeant Pipeline enter a grueling 50-week medical course at Fort Liberty, focusing on trauma management, minor surgery, and prolonged field care. The 18C Special Forces Engineer Sergeants master demolitions, construction, and breaching, learning to build or destroy critical infrastructure in hostile territory. The 18E Communications Sergeants learn highly classified cryptographic systems, satellite communications, and high-frequency radio wave propagation. The documented time from stepping foot at SFAS to finally being awarded the Special Forces tab frequently exceeds 18 to 24 months of continuous evaluation. The documented difference between Special Forces operators and other Special Operations forces is rooted directly in the specific mission sets of unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense, and civil affairs. While other elite military units specialize in direct action, hostage rescue, or strategic reconnaissance, A special forces detachment is designed to infiltrate a hostile nation, recruit an indigenous guerrilla force, and systematically overthrow a government. This operational reality requires an operator profile capable of extreme cultural immersion, strategic patience, and the ability to build rapport with disparate factions in highly volatile environments. The operational outcomes over the last 6 decades, from the central highlands of Vietnam to the mountains of Afghanistan, consistently justify the specific methodical selection architecture utilized at Camp Mackall. The Army's theory of unconventional warfare demands an operator who thrives in the shadows, operates without a script, and makes flawless command decisions when exhausted and completely alone. The rigorous, scientifically validated filtering process at SFAS ensures that only those with the exact cognitive and physical balance are allowed to wear the green beret. The selection mechanism is functioning exactly as it was mathematically designed to perform. If this gave you a real picture of what Special Forces selection is actually measuring, hit the like button. Drop a comment. Did you attend SFAS? What was the moment the ambiguity got to you? Share this with someone who thinks Special Forces is just about physical fitness. The land navigation failure rate will end that conversation immediately.